Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening and watching the Italian American Entertainment Podcast. And I'm your host, Vince Chiarelli. And today we have the great singer and entertainer, Vanessa Racci. And Vanessa puts a jazzy spin on classic Italian songs and performs throughout the United States at all types of venues and Italian festivals. So, welcome, Vanessa. How are you?
Hey Vince, how's it going?
Pretty good. Glad to have you on today and talk to you. This will be fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You're always fun to talk to.
Yeah, well, sometimes maybe. All right. So, how I start this thing out with everybody so far is to tell the audience where you're located now. Where are you from now? But where in Italy do you trace your ancestry?
Ooh, so I'll start with the Italy question. So my ancestry comes from areas of Puglia, so Bari and Monteleone di Puglia, which is like a little rural area that no one has heard of. Napoli and Calabria.
Okay. So, I know Napoli is south. Where's Puglia? I'm not sure off the top.
The eastern side, it's like southeast Italy.
Okay, so you're Southern Italian then.
I'm southern all the way.
All right, that's good. And where I know where you are now, but for the audience, where do you find yourself now?
Yeah, New York. Just 5 months ago, I was in New York, in Manhattan. But like many during COVID, escaped during the mass exodus to the suburbs.
It's interesting to someone like you've been to. I met Vanessa last year. She played at my Italian festival that I do out here in Rockford, where I live. And Rockford, so you've been to Rockford. You didn't see very much of it, but Rockford is not Chicago, so we're urban but not very big. So to me, when I heard about this like mass exodus, like you said, out of New York, I had no idea what was really going on until after the fact. So you're like what, 45 minutes north? Is that where you are?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I played up in Ulster County last year, um, and I think you've played that festival too.
Yeah, it's a really nice one.
Yeah, and that area of New York I had never been to before, so I'm assuming where you are now is similar looking to that. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think that's still considered the Hudson Valley because the Hudson Valley is obviously stretches along the Hudson River. So I am along the Hudson Valley with river views. So it's a really nice area. But just getting used to not being in the thick of it all, like
yeah,
access to all of the amazing restaurants. But a lot of them are closing anyway.
yeah. So are you? I'm assuming born and raised on the East Coast, right?
Born and raised in New York, yes.
Wow, what a life! I could not do it for more than 5 days, so then I've had enough of the big city. But anyways, it's a lot. But anyways, outside of that, when did you start performing and singing?
Oh, I started singing when I was 4 years old. My first song was The Greatest Love of All by Whitney Houston. It was popular at the time, I guess. And I started performing when I was 12.
Okay. And when did you actually have like a show that you would say was like your first big show?
When I was 12, I used to do Broadway dinner theater. And so my first show was as an elf in the Christmas extravaganza, some sort of show. I can't remember the name of it. And then I also did Oliver. I was Nancy in the Oliver show. I started obviously in musical theater, and I found jazz later on in life.
Sounds, I didn't know that about you, but it sounds a lot like me. When I started, I actually was all musical theater when I was a kid. That's how I got started. Peter Pan, I was in for 3 years. It was like the longest running off Broadway thing here in Rockford, and our little theater was Peter Pan, and I was Michael. So,
Oh,
I,
cool! You were
yeah,
learning new about each other. That's cool.
yeah, I got to fly. That was the coolest thing. They had the harness, and I got to fly around the theater. That was very cool at
Oh,
that
that is
age.
cool. Scary though, but very cool.
Yeah. So, when did you want and decide you wanted to get into Italian music?
Well, I think I was in my 20s, and oh, we talked about this before, where I grew up where my grandfather was living with me.
Hmm.
And so, throughout my childhood and my teens, I always grew up listening to like Connie Francis, Dean Martin, et cetera, et cetera. El Martino Lumanti. And when I found jazz, I started singing with a jazz band and touring around the metro area. And I was just doing like the American standard songbook. And I wanted to really do something that was my own and something that was personal. And I was soul searching and writing original songs. And I just kept thinking, well, I don't know, who cares about these? And like, what is something that's really going to resonate with me, but also other people? And so I was driving in my car after my grandfather had passed away, and I started singing some of the songs we used to sing together, like Aldila.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my goodness, that's it. Like, I can sing the songs that I learned in my childhood, even though they were very old songs, and reinvent them with, a new take and maybe keep them alive for new generations. And that's how it started.
Cool. Yeah. So I kind of went through the same thing where I had a band before. So did you actually have a band before the Italian thing, or did you really start? Okay. Oh, so you
Thank
did.
you,
Oh,
actually.
okay. Yeah, because we were playing like Weezer 1990s like punk stuff.
Please, yeah.
the
I love
the we were
music.
we were pop rock, and I was the lead guitarist singer, and I just got tired of playing. I love that stuff still, but I got tired of playing in the bars, and then my grandfather started getting really ill, and that's when I was like, okay, I want to try to do the Italian thing. And it was just kind of like I had sung these songs just like you my whole life, but when you think about performing out, it was like, well, does anybody really want to hear this stuff? And you can't play Aldi La in a in a bar. It's not going to go over very well. So yeah, so I had the same thing. It was kind of like a light bulb where it's, sometimes you don't have to appeal to the masses. All you need is really like 50 to 100 really good fans, and I'm sure you know some of those people where there's like this, they're really hardcore, they love what you're doing, and you make a difference for, even if it's one person, I think is more rewarding than, trying to play a Led Zeppelin song to make the biker bar happy. You know what I mean, if that makes sense. So, yeah. So do you ever, or did you ever get nervous? And do you still get nervous? I like asking that question to singers.
Oh my God. I have the worst nerves. I get so nervous all the time still. Yes, absolutely.
Really?
I was nervous since I was 12, and I'm still nervous.
I guess I don't know. I think you know me after a year now that we've talked. I'm a pretty anxious, nervous guy normally, but when it comes to music, for some reason I never get nervous.
Oh,
Um,
that's a
I,
gift.
I don't know why. Yeah, there's times where it's just you go on a big stage, everybody, no matter what, is gonna get. Even if you've done it for 50 years, I'm sure you still get like a little butterfly or something. But that's one thing I'm glad it does. That's why I like asking that question to musicians to see if anybody else is like me, where I just kind of go out there and do it, and I don't really care if I mess up or anything. Um,
That's ever. I wish
well,
it was. I mean, of course, like it usually wears off after the first
oh
song,
yeah.
but right before, I don't. It's this uncontrollable reaction, and it's like so irrational. Like, and I'm obviously confident. I sell myself, I promote myself, but I just can't control that bodily
Yeah.
reaction.
So if you were like me growing up with all this stuff, Connie Francis and Bobby Darin and all that stuff, and but did you have one big Italian American musical instrument influence?
Oh, for sure, Connie Francis. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because my grandfather was like in love with her, and he used to like literally blast it so that the entire neighborhood could hear it. He'd pull in and you could hear like mama. And so like she very much influenced me. And what I like about her is that Neapolitan cry in her voice.
Hmm.
It really tugs on like the heartstrings, and it's what I love and try to emulate as well when I sing.
So, I'm sure we're similar in age. We're both young, and we grew up listening to, that '90s music. So when you grew up listening to that stuff, was that more in the forefront of what you listened to, and the Italian was on the back burner, and then it's kind of gone reverse now? I'm kind of
Yeah,
where
I
where
would
I'm
say
where
so.
I'm where I'm going with that is because you've kind of taken the Italian music and gone jazzy with it. And so when you grew up in the 90s and, we all listened to whatever, Britney Spears and Backstreet Boys and all that, were you listening to that stuff, or were you or were you listening to, this jazz stuff? And if you weren't listening to the jazz stuff, when did you really start getting into jazz music?
I mean, I listened to everything when I was a teenager. I remember I had albums from Bocelli and Sinatra and Alicia Keys and No Doubt. I loved I'm Just a Girl, Alanis Morissette, um, Whitney Houston. Like I kind of listened to everything, I guess because I'm a singer and I love music. It was just everything. And then like started to focus more as I got older.
So the jazz, I am not a big jazz music guy, but there's different forms of jazz. Even though someone will say jazz, it's I like of course, the Italian type of jazz, the crooner stuff, and to me that is somewhat jazz. But do you like the improv jazz where it's just like all over the place? Do you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
type of
It's so funny. I love that you asked this question because my parents were like mad at me when I said I wanted to sing jazz because they're like, who listens to jazz? Ew. And I'm
right,
like, Sinatra is jazz, guys. And they're
right,
like, no, it's not. I'm like, yes, it is. And like I don't think people realize because they associate jazz with like CD 101.9 cool jazz, like elevator
right,
music.
right.
But that's a certain style, like the Kenny G thing, but that's not all types of jazz. Like I like the, swinging, like bebop, jump swing, like that sort of stuff. I really love, and people really like it. They
hmm
just don't realize they're listening to jazz.
Right, exactly. And maybe I didn't word it correctly when I asked the question, but I guess that's kind of the point I'm trying to get to with a lot of people too is, when you try to sell yourself or tell someone what you're doing, what we do is a little difficult because if you say I play Italian music, either people's heads go to, opera, or they go to, just that's amore, which there's way more than those two things. And it's the same thing with jazz. My head immediately, because I didn't grow up with, other than the Italian jazz, I didn't grow up with jazz. But my head, if someone says the word jazz, goes to like guys playing crazy things that don't make sense musically, and they're just improv, and which is unfortunate because I think a lot of people will think that. So when we say, you've heard how we play and you've played with me, we play a lot more Latin jazz,
Hmm.
and which is a whole different thing by itself. So I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know why jazz has gotten that bad rap sometimes. It's unfortunate, but
Yeah. Depending on like who I'm pitching myself to, I have to change the story.
right,
So like
exactly,
obviously jazz clubs, yes, I'll push that. Italian festivals, I don't talk about it,
right,
because I don't want people to get the wrong idea. It's like, did
right,
you listen to it? Did you like it? Great. That's all
right,
we have to talk about.
exactly. So it was 2017, I believe. Maybe I'm right. I looked at your website. Was your CD release? That was when
Mhm.
you came out with your CD. So tell everybody a little bit about your CD.
Yeah, so my CD is called Italiana Fresca, which means fresh Italian. And there's a little bit of a double entendre there because it's, fresh Italian music, a new take on it, but also I'm a fresh Italian. So I appreciated that. But yeah, so it's a song of like, not a song, it's an album of all the songs that my grandfather taught me growing up, just with a fresh take on them with revised jazz arrangements. And I worked with the musical director from Manhattan Transfer, which is a jazz group, a cappella group that people might be familiar with. And he wrote the majority of my arrangements. The other half was written by my pianist who I've worked with for a long time. And yeah, it's just a really fun take on Italian American classics.
Yeah, no, it's you gave me a copy of it last year, and it's definitely a fresh take on Italian music. It's not what everybody's heard before, so you did a great job with that one. Do you have something in the works for another CD?
I was supposed to be recording this year,
I
but the
know.
studio's shut down. So I'm just like doing Zoom shows until the studio opens again. But yes, I'm doing a new album. I actually launched the show last year at Birdland Jazz Club in Manhattan, and it's called Jazzy Italian. And it's the history of Italian American influence on jazz music from 1917 New Orleans to modern day. So these are, unlike the first album where they're Italian songs, these are American jazz standards from Italian composers. So hopefully it'll be more relatable to a broader audience because they're songs everyone knows and loves, like At Last, for
I was just,
example.
yeah, I was just gonna say that. Yeah.
But it shines a light on the fact that they were Italian composers that wrote them.
Yeah, no, that's you know, I'm with this website now. I'm discovering Italian Americans I never knew that wrote these songs, and I just learned that about that Harry Warren, that he was this songwriter that wrote At Last and all these hits. It's just like, oh my gosh, 42nd Street or something like that was him. It's just like,
Avenue you,
yeah.
for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
never knew that. So it's very interesting, and people watching this should look him up and see all the hits that he wrote that you wouldn't realize was written by an Italian American. But so after the past, how many years have you actually been on the road doing the Italian thing?
Since 2017. So 1894. Well, obviously it came
You're
to
right.
a reaching halt this year, but 3 years.
Okay, so in those 3 years or plus years, even performing before this, you've played at a few different Italian festivals and different venues around the country. But do you have a favorite, one or two favorite festivals that really stick out to you that you really liked playing at?
I mean, yes. I mean, I'm so partial to New York City, and San Gennaro is like such a rush because I don't know if you've seen on my YouTube channel, but like every year I was singing on the float to kick off San Gennaro. So you get on this little like Italian float and you go down Mulberry Street, and there's like hundreds of thousands of people lining the streets of Little Italy, just like screaming your name. It's like such a rush. It's so cool. Like you're like Italian famous for a day, you know?
That's cool.
I love San Gennaro. I'm so sad it's canceled this year, but it makes sense. It's the safe thing to do.
Yeah.
And then New Orleans was really cool. I know we were both supposed to perform this year and it got canceled
I know.
because that's the place where it all happened. That's where Italian jazz started, like Nick LaRocca, Louis Prima. That's the place where it happened, and you can just like smell that rich history. Like walking through the streets, there's a cool Italian American museum there. There's a jazz museum. It's like so freaking cool. I love that.
Yeah, no, it is. I actually went to New Orleans for the first time in December with my wife. She had a conference for her work, and I was like, I'm gonna go. It's 2 days. We were only there for like 2 days, but I'll walk around. And I went to the Italian American Museum or the Jazz Museum or whatever it was, and they had the Louis Prima exhibit, and that was very cool. But then there was like an Italian American little museum there. And I went in there, they had like a wall of like all the jazz musicians, and I had really no idea. My family, I know it's like New Orleans or East Coast is where everybody kind of went at first, Ellis Island or New Orleans. None of my family went through New Orleans, so I never really heard about this huge Italian culture in that New Orleans area. Now I'm starting to discover it, and it's kind of crazy that all
Yeah,
that music came out of there from Italians.
yeah. Mainly Sicilian for some reason. Like a lot of
Yeah.
Sicilians immigrated there. And then related, like they just had this formal apology this year. I think you may have seen it in the news for Italian lynchings in New
Oh,
Orleans
right.
that happened, I think, in the was it the early 1900s? But anyway, yeah, it was crazy. And the history is so cool because, like, obviously, Black people were way more oppressed than Italians for sure. But at the time when Sicilians immigrated, they were oppressed with the Black population of New Orleans.
Hmm.
And they were kind of like the populations that lived over the tracks and made music together. And so I think that's why a lot of Italians have such a rich history in jazz because they performed a lot with like the Black population.
Yeah, no, it's cool history. If there's some interesting things I'm hearing about with a lot of the stuff in New Orleans, and then there's some history of Booker T. Washington. Actually, I think it's him. If I'm wrong, sorry, but I think it was Booker T. Washington went to Sicily during all this and went to see how Sicily was in comparison. And there's some crazy things. I think he wrote a book on it about how Sicilians actually lived in Sicily, which is kind of sad when you look at it because I'm Sicilian, 100% Sicilian. And what he saw when he went to Sicily was, and the slavery in Sicily of their own people working in these mines and things is kind of crazy. So some crazy stories. But
Tell you that like my My great grandfather on my dad's side was put on a chain gang. Did I ever
Mm-mm.
tell you that?
No.
Yeah, he immigrated to New York, and he was dark skinned because he was Southern Italian, and he was like wrongfully like sent to Georgia and put on a chain gang to
Mm.
like work. It was crazy, and he escaped and came back to New York. But such a crazy story, like what our own families faced.
Yeah, no, my great great grandfather came over 5 times, worked on the railroad, and all these crazy stories that I'm hearing about. I couldn't imagine going back and forth 5 times on a 2 week
Oh,
journey to come here and 2 weeks to go back. It's just like, oh my gosh, in the bottom of the boat with, yeah, couldn't imagine. But now, for those just finding out about you, most of us Italian musicians don't do this full time. So I know you don't do it full time. But what do you love so far about your career as a singer?
what do I love the so far? Let's see. Maybe just the creative freedom. Like
Okay.
I can just create anything and make it happen and put it out there and see what happens. And so far, the stuff I've created, people have liked, and it's reached a certain level of success. Obviously, not like Grammy level or anything, but but yeah, I love that. I love just like creating something from scratch, putting it into the world, and just seeing how people react to it.
Do you? I didn't know you wrote original music, but do you still write? And do
Um,
you?
I put it on pause so I can focus on this new album, but I do have a bunch of songs that are just kind of like waiting. And I'm like, maybe it'll be a third album or something, but I'm trying to like focus on the Italian theme for now, see where that takes me, and then maybe I'll have my, solo original debut album next.
Yeah. No, it's. I started doing only originals when I was 16, playing in bars doing originals, and then 90% of my set was original and the rest was covers. Now it's different, but with my grandfather it's a little different too, because half of my set is technically original because it's his and my music plus the traditional Italian. But on my end, I'll never forget the only one time that felt like this crazy feeling about my career as a musician was playing at a graduation party. Um, and there was quite a few people there, and I was probably 18, 19, and I've written like over 400 songs, and I don't play half of them, but I used to play a lot of them. And I was playing a song that I had just written, and by the middle of the song, people were singing along to my original song that they had never heard before. And I turned to the band, and my wife was in the band at that time, and I was like, that's the greatest feeling I think I've had musically, that someone caught on to your own song. So hopefully you reach that point at some point, because that feeling that I got was very cool.
Yeah,
I wrote this and now other people are singing along with it. It's never happened again because I don't play original stuff anymore. But it's kind of the same feeling. Like you and I just did a video of my grandfather's song together, and that was fun to do. And that's rewarding to me. He's not doing it anymore because he's not here, but people hearing that song and liking it 50, 60 years later is very cool. So
that is.
um, yeah. So, what do you hope for the future of Italian American entertainment? And since we are both young, do you have a good feeling that there's other young Italian Americans that are going to continue our Italian American music?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's people like us across the country. We just have to band together, like that want to preserve the culture, because I'm seeing like that the more assimilated Italians get into the US, the more the culture starts to fade away. But there are, smart young Italian Americans who want to keep it alive in a way that's going to be relevant for the new generation. And I'm seeing pockets like you, obviously me, the Italian American podcast. I don't know if you've heard
Hmm.
of that, with John Viola and Dolores Alfieri, who works for Cuomo's office in New York. She's like the head of Italian American affairs for Dr. Cuomo. And so it's very much still alive. We just all have to like find each other and work at it, and hopefully we'll continue to keep the culture alive.
Yeah, and kind of going along, that's the same lines of that with the culture is, are you worried at all about the Italian American festivals.
Oh, sure, I am. Because the statement evolve or die is totally true. And a lot of the people running these festivals don't want to evolve.
Right.
Want to find new ways to reach the audience that aren't selling out, right? Like we talked about this where people just resort sometimes to like country music and I'm like, no,
Right.
no, no, no. Like how do we keep the brief, if you will, and I'm a marketer also, so I think about these things, but like the brief is how do you keep the culture alive in a way that is relevant for the new generation of Italian Americans versus bastardizing the culture or turning it into something else or just
Right.
making it American, you know? So
Exactly.
and there are totally ways to do it. I mean, you've seen like the chefs, there's Italian chefs across. I'm gonna forget their names now, but I forgot his name. But he opened like Bona Bona ice cream,
Oh,
and
right, right,
there's
right.
I think it's John Viola's cousin, and he like blended like American ice cream and gelato to have a new recipe. And he was on one of those like cooking competition shows. But he's keeping the culture alive in a fun, hip way. Like so many hipsters eat Bona Bona ice cream. It's cool. It's relevant. Like there are ways to do it. We just have to like I said, find each other and put our minds together.
Yeah, I think what you just said is right on how they need to evolve a little bit. And the only evolving I've seen is like what you just said. They try to appeal to the masses and Americanize it, which is we're in America, but you know what I mean when I say that, where it's you go to cover band or country music or you do, you know, the closer is whatever, you know, a rock group because they want beer sales and they want all that, and that's great. I understand it, but I've said it in a couple. I've said this in a couple of my episodes, which is if you want Mexican food, you go to a Mexican restaurant. You don't order a hamburger. So that's the same thing with Italian festivals. People want to feel Italian for the day or the weekend. So there's a happy medium there where you do want to appeal to everyone, and but you also want to keep it authentic. And unfortunately, I'm seeing some of the authenticity kind of slip
Yeah.
off. And but you saw what we did at our festival here in Rockford last year, the one that Benny and I put on, Solo Italiano, only Italian, and we kept it strictly Italian. And it didn't. No one's like scared by it or didn't come because it's just only Italian.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I thought it was a great success. And I
Yeah.
think, evolve, like there are ways to do it. Like get the like hot local Italian American chefs in your area, pull
Right.
them in, have them do a food truck, like pull in like hot new Italian American singers and pull in art artists. I know a lot of like Italian American artists that do mural arts, and it's like funky and it's hip and it's modern, but it's Italian, and it's like a mixologist that do like peronis and like what's the I'm sorry, not peronis. What am I thinking of? What's the drink that has Campari in it and it's like the something oni?
Oh, I.
Negroni.
Oh,
Negroni.
Negroni. Yeah, yeah.
Like, like do a like mixologist bar with a new take on like Italian drinks with Aperol and Campari. Like there's so many things we can do. Like maybe you and I should start like a new festival, like Italian Nouveau festival. But anyway, but like I think it's such a ripe opportunity.
Yeah, no, it is. And it takes, I think part of it is too, unfortunately, is, you know, my mom was born in Italy and my dad was born here, but we're 100% Sicilian. But it was still like I'm only one generation away from it. But a lot of the people in this country are already three, four generations like away from this culture. And so I think that's a little bit of it too, that the great grandparents and the grandparents have died off and they're already third generation. And so it's kind of like forgotten or they don't really care as much anymore, or they weren't really brought up with it as strongly. And I think that's, and the immigration has stopped from Italy. I mean, most of
Yeah.
them aren't coming over anymore. So now it's like you said, the us that are left have to kind of reinvent it a little bit.
I don't know, like why is Oktoberfest still so popular? Like that's German culture.
Polish Fest too is huge, especially out here where I live. Polish Fest is big. Yeah.
And like you still have St. Patty's Day. So I don't know, like there's something that we need there's a way to do it that will still make everyone excited. It's just finding what that is, because I'm like, what? I always think, why is Oktoberfest still so popular? And they do
Yeah.
them all across the country, and it's the same thing, like German music and beer and like Wiener Schnitzel, and
Yeah, they're probably not having a heavy metal cover band and ending the night.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know, I don't get it either. But I think Italian culture has been it's so diverse across this entire country. I've played every coast now, all over the country, and every festival is totally different. West Coast has a lot of like you were saying, the chalk mural. I had never seen that before until the West Coast, and that's very cool. But then, like Midwest, unless I haven't played a lot on the East Coast, but the Sicilian dancers are a big thing in the Midwest. So most of the Italian festivals out here, Des Moines, Chicago, they'll have like the dance troupe that comes out and they dance during the festival. But I've never seen that like other festivals around the country. So I think that there's like little pockets too that are a little different, and the food is different. Where I'm at is heavily Sicilian, and the city I'm from and the region I'm from in Sicily. So our food in Rockford is very different from like East Coast, of course, because it's different, regions of Italy out there. So it is interesting how all this has come about all these years afterwards, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah.
It's up to me and you, I guess. We got to do a new Italian festival.
We do. Yes, absolutely.
I'll do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll definitely be your creative partner, your co-chair.
All right. So before we get to the end of this, what's next for you? Any other, news that you want to share? Do you have any upcoming shows? I know it's tough right now and no one's really playing anywhere, but if you do have any shows, what do you have going on? And then how can people find you and listen to your music?
I do. I've been doing Zoom shows, and I have one coming up on October 11th and Sunday, October 11th, right before Columbus Day. And it's a jazzy Italian show that celebrates the history of Italian American influence on jazz music. So you can go to metropolitanzoom.com to get tickets, because it's through a hosting site on Zoom, the Metropolitan Room. And you can get tickets there. And for anyone who listens, you can enter the code SPECIAL, capital S, and get $5 off the ticket price.
Very cool. And then websites and all that, how can people find you?
So you can find me, my website, although I haven't updated it with shows because it's kind of wah-wah, but it's vanessaracci.com, VANESSARACCI.com. But the better way to follow me is on Instagram and Facebook at Vanessa Racci.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that's all the questions I have, unless you want to add anything here. But once again, I really appreciate you coming on, and it's great to see other young Italian Americans still doing this and keeping the music alive. So keep going, and hopefully we'll be out there again together next year. Hopefully we can play New Orleans next year together.
Bill.
We'll see. Hopefully this thing calms down a little bit. So, all right. Well, thank you once again for coming on. Everybody, check out Vanessa, and I'll include all your links on this post so people can find you.
Thanks, Vince. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks. We'll talk soon.
Bye.